Hi everyone, David Aragona and Mike Beer here, taking a look at the Wednesday race of the day. It is race 5 at Gulfstream Park. This is an optional claimer, 75,000, the optional claiming tag with a high level allowance condition going 7.5 furlongs on the turf course down in Hallandale Beach, Florida. Before we get into the handicapping, make sure to hit that like button and also subscribe to the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. We got a lot of cool stuff planned on the channel this week and new stuff coming up in coming weeks. So definitely subscribe to not miss any updates. And with this being the Wednesday race of the day, do note you can get free all access past performances to this race to handicap along with Mike and I. And Mike, we've got 8 runners signed on here. It's a pretty high class field for this kind of race on a Wednesday at Gulfstream Park, but the narrative really does center around the return of the number 7, Ice Chocolat.
It does feel like a good spot for Ice Chocolat to come back in. There, you're right though. There's talent sort of drawn to the inside of him in this field. Maybe some distance questions for some of these horses. Ice Chocolat, I guess the main question, David, is how does he come back off the layoff here? Because they've really never given this horse a break since he arrived in North America.
Yeah, he just kept getting better and better, running fairly consistently. Was in top form when we last saw him winning the poker, and never like to see a horse go to the sidelines after a career best effort like that. But we'll see if he can come back in top form for trainer Mark Casse. To get a sense of where Ice Chocolat could be placed in the early portions of this race, let's take a look at the Time Form US Pace Projector, and kind of a tricky one to read, Mike, because we got a few horses in this field that are stretching out from one-turn races, some that have gone 5 furlongs in their last start. So you would anticipate those horses would have speed on the stretch out to 2 turns. And then you have Ice Chocolat thrown into the mix, who is a horse who has shown speed on occasion, but also has run effectively coming from way off the pace.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't think you should get too fooled by the big recent win from Ice Chocolat on the lead, where they just sort of let him walk on a slow pace. Because really, other than that, he's not a speed horse. He's a horse who will sort of sit off the pace, and he's very, very effective that way. I thought the stretch out sprinters towards the inside, maybe they affected the 8 more than they affected anybody else.
Yeah, the number 4, Portofino, has shown speed of 43 and change to a half mile in a 5 furlong race. So you'd imagine that he'd be quick enough to get to the front here. Let's go through this field from the rail out, beginning with the number 1, Skyra, one of 2 Martin Drexler tradies that are drawn closest to the inside. This one is making his first start off the claim for that bar, and Drexler does have very good stats off the claim, so you wanted to be aware of that. With Skyro, I just question the current form that this horse is in, Mike, because he's run plenty of speed figures that put him right in the mix here. Probably a little more of them earned on the synthetic than on the turf, but he's run just fine on the turf in some tough spots in the past. And if you can make the case he's going to get back into better form for the new barn, he's a contender.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I did think it was fair to sort of maybe think that he's a little better on the synthetic than he is on turf, but he's good on turf. He's run some nice races. We'll see. It feels like maybe this race will set up well for him. I noticed the same thing you did. You look up Martin Drexler in Formulator. He's excellent off the claim. I just kind of, maybe I shouldn't be this hard on him. I wanted to see him do at least a little running when they put him back on turf last time. I thought he was terrible in that race.
I wonder if the barn change could give him a little more tactical speed, because when you go back to his early turf races, when he was successful on the surface, he actually had tactical speed and was up close to the pace. We'll see if the different barn could get him back to that style. The number 2, Classic Motown, is probably not going to be close to the front end. This horse has no early speed whatsoever going out for the same trainer, Martin Drexler. He's been in this barn for a while, though. And Mike, he has steadily improved ever since getting claimed for just $25,000 by these connections a little over a year ago. And he made a big late run against a high quality handicap field last time, was kind of hitting his best stride too late. I just wonder if the 7.5 furlongs is going to be a little sharp for him.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily see a great trip coming for him. I do recognize that maybe he's just in the best form of his life right now. And so that made me take at least a second look at him. But, overall, the races that he's run on turf so far, they're not going to get it done against this field. And even though there are stretch out horses in this race, I'm not so convinced they're going to be blazing up front here.
One of the more intriguing names in this race is the number 3, Johnny Padres, who some people might remember from when he was in top form in Southern California about a year ago, reeling off 3 wins in a row. He was one of those downhill 6.5 furlong specialists who won a couple of stakes over that configuration. He did kind of tail off in the second half of 2024, Mike, and they switched barns last time to bring him to the East Coast. Now he's with Jose D'Angelo, and he cut back to the sharp 5 furlongs in the Gulfstream Park Turf Sprint, where they went really fast up front, and he was was gradually making up ground along the rail at the end, but was never really a threat that day. He's got to answer the turn question, though, as he stretches out to the 7.5 furlongs here.
Yeah, don't love his recent form. That's a big drawback for me. The last time that he went 2 turns on the turf, and it was a while ago. It was almost 3 years ago. He did win that race, but he also won that race in wire-to-wire fashion, which isn't going to happen here. I don't know, David. I don't like his recent form, and to me, he looks like a closing sprinter stretching out, and I don't want horses like that.
The number 4 is Portofino, who was actually exiting the exact same race as Johnny Padres. He was even further back in the early stages, as Jose Ortiz showed no aggression from the start that day. Probably wasn't going to be quick enough to contest the pace along with eventual winner Coppola anyway, but he was running on belatedly at the end. Again, never really a threat. He had showed much better early speed on his prior turf sprints, and if he's able to get back to that running style here, Mike, is there a chance this horse wires the field?
Yeah, I think there is a chance that happens. I can't say that I fully trust him to do that, but it just feels like the kind of horse who can make the lead in here. He's probably going to be a fair price in this race, too. I don't trust him stretching out, David, but I thought he was at least mildly dangerous.
The number 5, Ruse, faced some really nice horses last time, competing at this level, beaten by Silent Heart, who has been in top form, a stakes level performer who came right back to just barely miss in a grade 3 event last week at the Gulfstream Park. Also strong quality. The runner-up in that race is a stakes winner himself. So no disgrace in Ruse finishing third at 20-1 behind those runners. And Mike, this horse doesn't win that often, but he's usually giving a good account of himself. He's very consistent, and he's got the right kind of running style if this pace doesn't really heat up.
Yeah, I'd like that about him too. I mean, he's probably going to need, at least a favorite, maybe another horse or two, not to show up with their best race here if he's going to win. But he's pretty good, as you've already mentioned. He's ultra consistent. He always shows up and runs his race, and he's been way more tactical in the last year or so. I mean, going back in his PPs, he was always kind of a speed horse. They want to put him on the lead a lot. It's not the case anymore. He's very comfortable rating. He can get the right trip in this race. He almost never gets bet, so you feel like you're going to get a fair price on him. I don't know. I could make a case for this horse.
Number 6 is Sosua Summer, who is the other Jose D'Angelo horse in this race. Another one who has been recently switched into this barn, made his first start for D'Angelo last time, going out for the same ownership. And Mike, I just thought this horse was never really in position to be effective in that spot because they really were not moving up front for the 5 furlong distance at Gulfstream Park for a race that went in 55-1, 22-1 to the opening quarter is basically walking at Gulfstream Park. And he was the only horse that was passing rivals at the end and was really hitting his best stride once they finally got him off the inside in about the final 16th of a mile and galloped out well. Maybe that's a signal that this horse is moving back in the right direction because he does have back form going, a year ago or more that would make him competitive with the field like this. He's just got to prove that he can do it going the 7.5 furlongs, but he does have some 2-turn races from early in his career that suggest he might not be that much worse going this distance that he is sprinting.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's a fair way to look at him. I would look at his most recent start, as you've mentioned, enough trouble, and the way the race shaped in front of him to just give him a pass for it and look at it as a really good prep to try to stretch him out here. I think the main issue that I have with him, David, and we'll see if he's just better or maybe takes a step forward stretching out here. I've never liked this horse. I don't like him as a sprinter at all. And so I'm not, going to sit here and say I have high hopes for him being better stretching out in distance. I'm just not that much of a fan of this horse, but I also don't want to knock him too much at 15-1.
Yeah, it does feel like a horse that's always struggling to keep up early in the sprint races. We'll see if he can be a little more forwardly placed on the stretch out. The number 7 is Ice Chocolat, and he is just the class of this field and the horse to beat if he comes back in top form for trainer Mark Casse. We'll take a look at his most recent start, which went all the way back to last June when he upset the field at 24-1 in the grade 3 poker. And Mike, as you were alluding to earlier, a different running style for this horse on this occasion. Jose Ortiz was very astute coming out of the starting gate, saw that others were not being aggressive, and just made the game time decision to send this horse to the front. And it proved to be the right choice because he really backed down this pace. They went 48 to the half mile and then went the second half in 45-4 to come home in sub 134 for the mile distance. So there was no catching him that day. Not his typical running style, but running style doesn't really matter for a horse like this. He's just really good and he runs well against better horses than this.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's just way the horse to beat in here. Even if you want to say he got lucky and just, sort of stole that last one, that's, not the only race to judge him off of. And just about everything he ran, every race he ran for the year prior to that, just makes him really, really tough in here. The main question is, how does he come back off the layoff here? I do think he's very well spotted. Does he need one off the bench? If he needs one off the bench, maybe he's vulnerable.
Yeah, I was looking up some stats and formulator for trading Mark Cassie, especially coming back off this kind of layoff on the turf. And over 5 years, the numbers are really not good at all. But if you just put those numbers in the past year, they're really good. And it just feels like the entire Cassie barn has been on a real run for about 12 months now. So maybe 5 year stats don't matter so much for a horse like Ice Chocolat. The number 8 is Tut's Revenge. And he would love to be able to clear some of those sprinters to the inside and get to the lead, because this is a horse who seems to really run his best races when he can relax all alone by himself on the front end. That's the way he was able to achieve a couple of victories in Kentucky last summer, including a stakes win at Ellis Park, where he really backed down the pace and was able to hold off some good horses, like including eventual Grade 1 winner Win for the Money. Mike, I don't love his last couple of starts, and both of those were races where he wasn't able to make the front end. And I worry from this post if he's going to have trouble making the lead here.
I agree. I mean, listen, I kind of didn't want to be too hard on him for the two most recent starts, if only because, one of them was at Kentucky Downs, where he was just in against a better speed horse and Goliad. He just had no chance in there. And then they just wheel him back on short rest, and it's yielding turf at Hawthorne. So, listen, I'm trying to be a little lenient for those two performances. That being said, you go back to the two races prior to that, he won both of those. I don't like either of those performances. I mean, they just let him walk on the lead in those races, and he got lucky to win that race 4 starts back. I mean, he just barely held on, even though he had a slow pace to work with. I don't know. To me, he's second choice on the morning line, and if he goes off as the second choice in there, he's the horse I would try to beat and just try to get somebody else in there with the favorite.
Yeah, it does feel like a horse that's been opportunistic in the past and now trying to recapture that top form as a 9-year-old. Not the easiest thing to do. Let's throw up our picks for this optional claiming event on Wednesday. And Mike, you're going to go with the number 5, Ruse, who just has the consistency and seems to fit well from a class perspective.
I just feel like he'll show up here and run his race, David. And if Ice Chocolat really does need one off the layoff here, maybe Ruse will be in position to sort of take advantage a little bit. I know he's going to be a fair price in this race. And he's the only one that I could really talk myself into if I wanted to take a shot against the favorite.
Yeah, I'm going out on a bit of a limb with a horse that's a big price on the line of the number 6, Sosua Summer. And I admit his recent form makes him a little tough to like, but I did see those signs of life in his last race. And maybe, as you were suggesting, that's a prep for this stretch out, that I don't mind the 7.5 furlongs for this horse if he can recapture some of that top form from the past. So 6, 7, 1, 5 for me, and 5, 7, 8, 1 for Mike in the DRF Wednesday race of the day, race 5 at Gulfstream Park. Good luck if you're playing the races later this week.